Going to hit start webinar. Cool. Indeed. Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're going to wait another minute or so just to let more folks hop on, and then we can get started. Going to hit start webinar. Hello, Krista. Hello, everyone. Why don't we get started? So, hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this webinar. To protect Pipestone. We're here to talk about the sacred Pipestone quarry that is under threat from a new pipeline in the state of Minnesota. This webinar is going to cover some of the background of the project, as well as the history of the site, and how everyday people can be empowered to stop the pipeline by leaving public comments with the PUC. If that is something that you're interested in doing, you'll notice that there is a border around each speaker that has an email and docket number. That is the best way to submit your comment, is to email and to include that docket number as well. I will introduce myself really quickly. Yat she Brenda Yellow Thunder Unishe, Twitch Eatney Mishle, Touch Eatney Dashe, Wanagida Wanshik Bashichin, Standing Rock Su Dashinele, Akut Ego Dine Ado Pochunk Ado Standing Rock Su Nishle, Kintwana Nasha. Hello, everyone. My name is Brenna Yellow Thunder. I am Bitterwater Clan, born for Warrior Clan. My maternal grandfather is Red Running Through the Water Clan, and my paternal grandfather is Standing Rock. And in these ways, I am a Standing Rock, Ho-Chunk, and Navajo person. And I'm from Flagstaff, Arizona, and also Black River Falls, Wisconsin. I am a co-lead coordinator of the Keep It in the Ground program at the Indigenous Environmental Network, and I use they, them pronouns. I will pass it to one of our panelists, Leanna Goose, to introduce herself.
Buju ne Dunaway Maginadug, Leanna Goose, Nindigena Cause, Makwan Dudame, Gasaga, Squadjamekog, Nindun Jaba, Wabig Wanising Nadam. Hello, my relatives. My name is Leanna Goose. My clan is Bear. I am from Leech Lake. I live in the place of Many Little Flowers, right off of Leech Lake. I work within the Rise and Repair Alliance space, which is focused on advancing climate justice while protecting Indigenous rights. And I will pass it over to Mark.
Uchopaluta macho aplo pchahe sinte ewa ti oglala lakota na wowapichara mie. My name is Mark Kenneth Tilson. I'm from Porcupine, South Dakota. I'm an enrolled member of the Oglala Sioux tribe. I'm also a writer, and I am currently the National Pipeline Organizer for the Indigenous Environmental Network. I'm glad to be here and sharing this, and I'll pass it to Joey.
Anin Buju Ernest Joseph Upagard Peltier the third Indigenous Makadewa Makanjunjum and Junjinaba Makanakwa Jiji and Inuit Bajigamab. Hi, I'm Joey Peltier. I am out of Bemidji, and I am the co-executive director of MUCWA, also a water protector and a community organizer. Back to you, Brenna.
Thanks, Joey. Thank you everyone for introducing yourself. I really love being able to start off a webinar with hearing our languages. I think it's a great way to invite the audience and the listeners to learn about what we would like to share with them today. And speaking of that, we are going to actually, before we get started, I wanted to mention if there are any questions and you're currently in this webinar on Zoom, please feel free to drop those in the chat and we will answer them as they come in. And for those who are listening through a shared live stream, whether that's on Facebook or LinkedIn or what have you, you can drop a comment in there and we will get to that question as soon as it is relayed to us. And so we want to make sure where y'all have questions that we're able to answer them as we're going through this, because we're going to have a lot of information we're about to throw at you. And so we want to make sure that y'all are informed and to have this be a little bit of like a conversation. So yes, we'll start with hearing from Mark, and he is going to talk a little bit more about the Pipestone Quarry and the cultural importance.
Yeah. Good afternoon, good evening. I think for a lot of folks, we know the importance of, for Lakota people, our sacred chanupa, our pipe. I think one of the things that I'm not sure a lot of us have, people who are sun dancers, people who regularly participate in ceremonies, there's only one source for pipestone in the country. It's one of the only places in the entire world that it can be found, and that's in Pipestone, Minnesota, and it's incredibly rare. I think there's a quarry for black pipestone in Canada, but for the red pipestone that we all use, pipestone is kind of it. And so it's incredibly important and incredibly vital that we protect it and keep it, and so it can be around and harvested for future generations. And hopefully it can be, I don't know, for all future generations still be preserved. One of the things that I am trying to write a very large public comment that covers some of our history, some of our understandings, and a little bit of the story of Pte Sangwi, who's the bringer of the white buffalo calf pipe and the seven sacred rites of the Lakota. My understanding is that in our Lakota way, she's a reincarnation of Woape, the lawgiver from our creation stories. And as we're entering these public comments, it's important to talk about some of the technical data, but also really to speak from our heart, use our own words, and understand the absolute importance of this cultural site and of our ceremonies. One of the things that's so important is knowing a little bit of the history that kind of went into where we're at with the pipeline. And this particular, Leanna will later get into talking about our treaties and specifically the 1858 Yankton Treaty, which actually established Pipestone has a protected area. And up until this pipeline fight, I didn't know about this treaty. And I'm a guy who can like quote, cite and verse 1851, 1868 of the Fort Laramie treaties. I memorize the boundaries and the clauses, and that's my jam. 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty is a really important document, and you can actually memorize it if you put some time and energy into it. And I'm a treaty guy who's fascinated by this stuff. Somebody who's interested in the treaties, I should say. But I didn't know about this treaty. Hello, Amanda Provost out in Sioux Falls. Welcome. Yeah, and kind of getting into the history there. One of the things that's kind of interesting is I didn't know there was a pipeline directly through the National Monument itself. That pipeline was built in the 1940s. Before that, there was any federal protection for our sacred sites. And yeah, and it existed for all of this time, and it was only decommissioned when the permit of the pipeline itself expired in 2022. And I think it was a year later that the new permit was applied for. And I remember at the time there was something like 50,000 comments that were raised during that public comment period. And it was almost universally against the pipeline itself. And I remember there was a public hearing at the PUC and all of these different tribes showed up. And I'm not sure I've seen this kind of interaction from the PUC before, at least in Minnesota. Um, One of the tribes early on to take a lead was the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, who passed a resolution demanding a nation-to-nation relationship, something more than just a consultation, but actually working on creating has a normal expectation between the state government and the tribal governments. Right now, where we're at in the process is there was a cultural survey done, but it was not done adequately. And yeah, to tell even more of the story, after the public hearing was done, the permit was rescinded pending this cultural survey. The Public Utilities Commission actually ordered the Magellan Pipeline Company to work with the Minnesota Indian Affairs Council in selecting a culturally competent contractor to complete the cultural survey. And they were waiting for interaction from MIAC very briefly, and then they unilaterally chose their own contractor to speed the process up, to treat it as if it was just one more box to check. And so they violated the PUC orders. Out of the 23 tribes that have been documented as using the Pipestone National Quarry, only 6 of them were engaged with the cultural survey. 20% of the land was not actually surveyed, and they only did the surface. There was no methane probe or like ground penetrating radar, no archaeological exploration. And yeah, and so the Braveheart Society is quoted as saying like this cultural survey is inadequate and incomplete. And we really believe that too. And so yeah, I one of the things I kind of grudgingly admit while I'm doing these talks is there's oftentimes I feel like Pipestone might be one of our sacred sites that we kind of take for granted a little bit because we have an expectation. We have an expectation that it's always going to be there. And I don't think we can do that right now, especially when it's under attack. We have to rally our attention. We have to rally our focus. And the easiest way to shut down this pipeline is through the public comment period. And right now, this initial public comment period is open and it runs until June 22nd for initial comments. Yeah. And yeah, I think we have a slideshow that can kind of get us up to speed. And Leanna, if you're ready to move on to that portion.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm going to walk through some topics that you can use to help create your comment. I will be talking about treaty rights, and endangered fish, and also FPIC and many other topics. And yeah, can I see the slide, or can everyone see the slide, or how does this work? I'm just wondering. I feel like the visuals within there are part of what I would like people to see. Okay. So yeah, hopefully we can get those slides up. And I just want to note, first of all, like treaty rights are the supreme law of the land. Underneath Article 6 of the United States Constitution, this is known as the Supremacy Clause. And this specific clause in the Constitution, the highest law of the land means, that corporate profits and jobs and pipelines do not come before treaty rights, and that the state of Minnesota and the U.S. government must consider treaty rights above all else. And the Constitution is clear on this. So the only move here is to reject this pipeline and support the no build option, as this pipeline is a direct threat to treaty rights. And I also just want to note as well, yeah, hopefully we can get the slides up eventually. But I also want to note as well that like we're in a climate crisis right now. Treaty rights are being impacted here in Minnesota, and now is not the time to build new fossil fuel infrastructure. Now is the time to be transitioning away from fossil fuels in a just way. So I just want to note that this is a picture of my dad at Pipestone. And I have his pipe that he made, and I carry that with me. And yeah. And that's a really special place, to so many people, so many tribal nations, so many citizens across the United States. As Mark said, it is central to who we are as our identity as Indigenous people. So in 1858, the Yankton Treaty was signed, in which the area of Pipestone was promised to the Yankton tribe to retain and keep it the same, open and free to Indians to visit and procure stone for pipes so long as they shall desire. And that's like directly from that treaty. And there's a long history there. I'm just gonna like briefly touch on it. The Supreme Court did take away that land, but that right to quarry the pipestone, that still belongs to that tribe. So in treaty law, whatever is not taken away remains. So this is, once again, the highest law of the land is the treaties, and they must be upheld and protected for future generations. This and other treaties signed during this time allowed for the creation of the state of Minnesota in 1858. And I just want to note too that these treaties, when they were signed, our ancestors, they ceded this land to make to allow the state and the United States to even exist. And they were moved on to, tiny reservations. And Anishinaabe, the word for reservation is Ishkonigan. And I've been told by my elders it means what's left. So out of all of the United States, we have these checkerboard pieces of land. And right now in this moment, there are so many proposed projects that threaten not only Pipestone, but other sacred places to Indigenous nations. And Indigenous nations, they are quite literally protecting the web of life as we know it in this moment. They make up just 5% of the global population, but they protect 80% of the world's remaining biodiversity. So protecting treaty rights means protecting all of life. You can go to the next slide, please. And I just wanted to note that Pipestone is central to Indian religious freedoms. And this act was enacted in 1978. So less than a century ago, it became law that, Indians could practice their religion in the United States. Up until this point, the ceremonies and practices central to our spirituality and religion had been outlawed. The United States had the motto, "Kill the Indian to save the man," which paved the way for assimilation and the attempted cultural genocide of an entire race of people. And I just also want to note the boarding school era. That was a really tough time, and that's just like one generation away. I know one of my elders who passed away, he talked about like the boarding school. So we're just not that far off from that painful history. And in this area in Pipestone, there was a boarding school. And there's been reports that, children passed away there. They were not allowed to speak their language. They were abused. They had their hair cut, and some of them passed away. And there's burial sites there that are unmarked, and their parents could not collect their remains. So those little souls, they deserve to rest on into eternity. And so that's another reason why we do not need this pipeline in this area. I just also want to note too that like this genocide that took place, that the Nazi regime looked to the example set by America to the Native Americans to inflict the damage of the Holocaust. So what the United States did and is continuing to do to this day, it's radiated across the world in a really bad way. And we're still seeing, genocide taking place to this day over in Palestine. So it's really a time, that we stand up and speak out and stand together. So I just want to read this one portion of the Indian Religious Freedom Act because it's really important to make in your comment. And if you want to take a picture of this one, I think it can help. So under the Indian Religious Freedom Act, the United States is to protect and preserve for American Indians their inherent right of freedom to believe, express, and exercise the traditional religions of the American Indian, Esquimalt, Aleut, and Native Hawaiians, including but not limited to access to sites, use and possession of sacred objects, and the freedom to worship through ceremonial and traditional rites. So that right there is a central piece of United States history and them trying to do better by First Nations people. And we have to hold them to this. This pipestone is part of our ceremonies. It's part of our gatherings. It's part of helping our loved ones walk onto the spirit world. So it is a central part of our religion. And right now in this moment, it's really going to take all of us speaking up and speaking out. You can go to the next slide, please. And I wanted to talk about this federally protected fish. This fish is an endangered species, and the government has processes to protect endangered species. So noting that there is a federally protected fish that is at risk of disappearing, the Topeka Shiner, which is located in Pipestone Creek. Noting that in your comment can help push back this pipeline and stop it, because if this pipeline leaks, it could harm this endangered species. Endangered species are federally protected, and the fact that this fish is here means that this project should not be put here or anywhere. You can go to the next slide, please. So all tribes within the US have a legal right to quarry within Pipestone. And you can look at the National Park Service. They have this laid out as well, this first part. All tribally enrolled members have the right to quarry at Pipestone. This pipestone is central to Indian religious freedom, and this pipeline is a direct threat to our spirituality, our cultures, and our ceremonies. And I also want to note that, like, in order for a true consultation to have taken place around this proposed pipeline, I would say that all tribes within the United States, they should have been consulted on this proposed project, because it is an area where tribes from any nation that are enrolled can go there and quarry the sacred stone. So there are about 574 federally recognized tribes. And as you heard from Mark, only a couple of them were consulted. And the consultation process that did take place was inadequate, as all tribal nations can have a connection to this sacred space. And again, this pipestone is one of a kind, and this grade of catalanite can only be found here in this space. You can go to the next slide, please. So again, you heard Mark talk about consultation, and we really need to work to move towards consent. Free, prior, and informed consent is an international human rights standard and is laid out in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People as a process that truly respects tribal sovereignty and self-determination. In 2025, at the Seattle gathering of the National Congress of American Indians, Leech Lake Nation helped to pass a resolution requiring free, prior, and informed consent by corporations, companies, state and federal and government agencies across the United States and globally. This resolution aims to help us move from a broken system of consultation into a system that truly respects and upholds the rights of tribal nations. So right now, in this moment, there are a lot of projects that are moving forward, and consultation is a process that is supposed to be followed. But there is really truly no mechanism in there to allow tribal nations to reject these projects that they know are not good for them. So we have to move our agencies and our government towards this system that truly respects tribal sovereignty and Indigenous homelands. And this is just a piece of the resolution, and I'm just going to read it. Free, prior, and informed consent. It is international human rights standard that affirms the sovereignty and self-determination of Indigenous peoples, ensuring that no action affecting their lands, territories, resources, culture, or livelihoods proceeds without their freely given consent. And you can find this resolution at riseandrepair.org. It's under understandings. And if you want to attach it as well, you can attach it to the PUC docket, which I did when I submitted my comment. And Joey is going to walk you through that process now. So miigwech, I think.
I think we're actually going to talk a little bit about the political and environmental moment, or was that it?
Yeah, no, and also I just wanted to take a moment to check in with the chat and to see if we have any questions. And
Yes, we have a few questions. The first one, was the Yankton Treaty the same as the Traverse de Sioux Treaty?
no, that's actually it happened during the same time period, but it's actually its own unique treaty. And that's one of the reasons why, like, I know about the Treaty of Traverse, and same year, I believe, but not actually the same period, or excuse me, not the same negotiation and not the exact same cast of characters, but it was during the same time period. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Mark. We also had a question from Joanna about what kind of comment can people make that support the opposition. And so if y'all have the same question, I answered in the chat. I put a link into the page that Ian has on our website, which includes a really brief, like 1 to 2 sentence answer that you can model off of. We also heard from Leanna that you can attach that resolution from NCAI about free, prior, and informed consent. So those are a few ways. And then from Nicole, there's asked, are any tribes suing at the moment, or do they plan to?
Not that I am aware of. Right now there's no active lawsuits from tribal governments about this. And I think I think there's going to be any litigation would probably happen after the PUC makes its decision. And pending that, I mean, hopefully that the PUC makes the right choice and denies the permit so we won't have to go too far down that route. And yeah, I just want to say as you're making your comment, email them to consumer.puc@state.mn.us and in the subject line put docket 23-109. And over time, you're going to memorize that 23-09. It's important. They'll be able to track down and put your comment there if you say Magellan pipeline, but they want that docket number, just part of the PUC way of doing things. Yeah, one of the things that I find fascinating about this part of the conversation is when we say free and prior informed consent, I believe this comes from the United States Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And I think following UNDRIP and seeing the National Congress of the American Indian really rally together around free and prior informed consent, it would be a game changer in the way that the way that the federal and state governments deal with tribes, tribal people, and our tribal governments, especially around this extractive industries. I think it's a really big move and a big shift, and I think that it makes a lot of sense for at the PUC level telling the state that we want them to start engaging in these nation to nation relationships and using free and prior informed consent as a standard. I think that, looking at the participation of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribes in the cultural survey, Lexi Steve Vance was very, very clear in his comments, and his anger and rage showed up through that comment. And he says, while they were conducting the cultural survey, the option to have no action taken was never even presented. It's as if that the attitude of the pipeline company was, this pipeline's going through, which route do you need? And that's not what we're talking about when we're talking about nation to nation relationships. That's not what we're talking about when we're talking about free and prior and conformed consent. And that's not about respecting treaty rights and indigenous rights. We want the ability to say no to these projects that are crossing our treaty lands and affect future generations around our sacred sites. And there's also the whole damn thing where this isn't the time to be investing into fossil fuel infrastructure. We know and have known since the 1960s that the amount of fossil fuels we burn directly correlates to a warming environment. I gotta sneeze, so someone else can take over for a moment.
And, so a lot of this Pipestone monument is directly located and culturally sensitive to our Oglala relatives. And as an Anishinaabe, we have been like the folks that have been organizing around the Pipestone Monument for years now, primarily us through the Redstone Movement, which is comprised of the affected tribal governments and led by the Braveheart Society. We have been engaging in FPIC as we've been moving forward with our organizing, with educating everyone what's going on, and then we've been moving as a coordinated group to bring forth the resistance to our having our cultural significant area affected by this pipeline. So as for FPIC, it's not just something that we are asking the U.S. government. We're actually participating that within intertribal politics and intertribal coalition building, and which is something that is not just needed with as I said, within the federal government, the state government, and our local governments, but also intertribal governments. Which has kind of been cool as an Anishinaabe to work alongside of all of these other tribal governments and just navigating that different cultural and spiritual practices that we all do.
Yeah, thank you for
Mark,
that,
I wanted
Joey.
to see if Leanna had anything to add.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, I see there's a question in the chat. So why should non-Indigenous people care about protecting Pipestone? And I would just note that, you know, it's central to our religion, spirituality, and our ways of life. And I think non-Indigenous people can, you know, relate to that. They can relate to, you know, caring about their own religion. And I think like that understanding can be used to like do reparations. I know that it's going to really take all of us to stop the threats that are coming our way. Like we're talking about free, prior, and informed consent in this space. And I think that like, you know, these projects that could really harm communities. You know, they're not only taking place right next to Indigenous nations, but they're also taking place next to local communities. And these things are also happening without their free, prior, and informed consent. Like these data centers we see cropping up all across the United States. And we all should be able to say, you know, no, we don't want this. It's not gonna benefit us. It's not gonna help us. So I just also wanted to note that we all need to care because we only get one planet, and we only get, you know, one chance to do things right. And we're in a really critical moment where we have to shift away from these fossil fuels, and we have to do it in a good way. So that's what I have to add. Miigwech, Brenna. Thank you.
I also want to segue on to what Leanna said. If I remember right, about a year ago, a year and a half ago, Pipestone, the community itself, which is a settler community, pushed back against this pipeline being built within the monument itself. And then furthermore, this monument is not just utilized by us tribal members. It is a national monument within Minnesota that folks and tourists go yearly, and it brings folks up to Minnesota and down from other states. So it is part of our economy within Minnesota. It's not just impacting us Indigenous folks, it's impacting all of Minnesotans and our surrounding states.
Yeah, I kind of come back to that reality again and again is why should Indigenous people care, or excuse me, why should non-Indigenous people care? Is because it's really affecting your water and your land as well. A spill of a pipeline, um, yeah, a spill of a pipeline would affect the local community just as much. And the people of Pipestone, Minnesota actually love the quarry. They appreciate it for it, you know, for the tourist revenue dollars that it in the generates, as well as the simple beauty of this natural space that's being allowed to be protected. And I think when we're talking about specifically fossil fuel infrastructure, you know, to build off of what Leanna said, we only have the one planet, and it's all of our duties to step up and confront this fossil fuel industry that seems to be content on burning up all of the oil that it possibly can, in the vain hopes that somehow making enough money will secure their future indefinitely. But they'll be just if this you know, the reality of that is like they're fighting for a future where they're the wealthiest people on an unlivable planet, and we're trying to pump the brakes on it. And as we fight one pipeline, it's a way to fight all pipelines. And so this is just the one that's currently in front of us. And to answer Nicole Yanez, yes, you can sign on individually as an individual, and not just but and has an organization. Um, and it's really powerful. Like there's a lot of amplification that happens when organizations sign on. And for individuals, we want you to really use your unique voice. Um, some of the copy and paste like form letters, they kind of get correlated into like just a data point that can be dismissed. But it's really important that we want you to sit down and just use your own words while you're crafting your comment. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, right now to answer Tashi, Yeah, the most important thing you can do right now is to submit a public comment and to just also follow Braveheart Society on Facebook, and they'll be updating people as well. If you're in the Twin Cities area on June 22nd, the Indigenous Protector Movement, the Red Nation, and IAN, along with Braveheart Society, will be hosting a very similar session to this, just kind of like an in-person version. And we're going to have the Dr. Alexis Archambault, who's a hydrologist from Standing Rock, on the line with us, informing our people about the research that they've done, along with the ecologist Elijah Small from Braveheart Society, who can really dig in to some of the more intricate details about the unique environmental impact that this pipeline can have on the area. All right, just going through the webinar chat, trying to get caught up here.
Yes, we have some questions. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Joey.
Okay, so going on this journey with the Oglala's for the past 2 years, it's been an amazing journey. But growing up in North Dakota, I remember when the first white buffalo was born in this century. It was born in Jamestown, Minnesota. And it was such an amazing sight. My family, we all went to go see that first white buffalo. And not really knowing the significance to your culture, and also to our cultures with the pipestone itself being gifted by correct me if I'm wrong, the white buffalo woman, gifting that to our cultures and helping us learn how to pray and process what's going on in our lives with our pipe carriers. And then about 2 years ago, I want to say, my reservation on Turtle Mountains, we have several white buffalo. They've been popping out left and right, and so we ended up seizing the moment of the current situation that we're in, and joining in unity and gifting out 5 white buffalo to South Dakota tribes, Minnesota tribes. I remember Red Lake got a white buffalo from us, and we went out to the Turtle Mountains for that gifting ceremony and to learn more deeply about the white buffalo woman and the cultural significance to our Oglala relatives. It was something amazing. And for my tribe to embrace unity during this time where we need that coalition, we need that working together, it was something powerful for me to be able to experience. And then, as I said, 2 years on this project, and getting to learn from you all, the Redstone movement, Braveheart Society, the ceremonies around the pipe itself, how we use the pipe here in Anishinaabe culture. It's been amazing, and to see this threat coming in to our pipestone, our geologists, the Braveheart geologists and hydrologists, they warned us that the construction of this pipeline could crush that catlonite. It's such a soft mineral that you could use your fingernail and just scratch and it just comes off. That's how soft it is. And to put all that equipment on top of the soil, we will lose what we have. There's not much left of that catlonite left. There's only a small sliver, and we have to look towards the future. Will we have pipe carriers with new pipes? I don't know. But the thing is, this is all we have left now. This is the blood of the people. That is what the Pipestone is centered around, the flood. So I'll pass it over to you, Mark, if you want to say anything, or Brenna.
Yeah, I remember these teachings around like how like whatever you're around, goes into your pipe. And now that when we're talking about petroleum contamination, that's literal, is like cadmiolite, this pipestone, it's a porous material. I know there's people who kind of condition their stone with shea butter, and I know there's people who protect it with beeswax. And the reason why is because it is a porous material. And after hearing from Braveheart Society about the first round of PUC hearings, there was no plan of there was no real plan to deal with a contamination of the sacred site itself. And there's not a way. They have no idea how, if there was a catastrophic break of the pipeline and if there was contamination of the pipestone, how to get that petroleum out of there. Yeah. And yeah, I think that's a really important thing to think about. And like, this is a very, very special place, and we do have to hold on to it and fight for what we have left. And I think one of the things is like whenever we're engaged in indigenous resistance, um, it's so much easier to fight them at the Public Utilities Commissions level than after when it's already being constructed and you're out on the land and you have to stand in front of the machines and yeah. And I think that part of our indigenous resistance is always going back to culture, always going back to prayer, out of protocol, out of necessity, out of tradition, and also creating a solid foundation. When we are more connected to ourselves and our way of being, the easier it is for our allies to feel solid in us and to plug in and to follow our indigenous leadership as we step up and defend our lands, our water, and our sacred sites like Pipestone.
Exactly. I keep thinking about that question that someone had in the chat about how do I as a relative, like how can I as someone who is indigenous help out our Dakota relatives? And I just keep thinking that there's no Native person who doesn't understand that our sacred site, wherever we live, has been threatened by something like this pipeline, or by a mining project, or by a hydro or a dam, or what have you. The thing that is uniting us all is our connection to that land as Indigenous people. That's where our sovereignty comes from, our connection to that land. And even though my tribe, the Ho-Chunk Nation, is not situated within the state of Minnesota, I still see the effect that this pipestone quarry has on our beliefs and our cultural system. I know that my grandfather and my brother have connections to the quarry, that they have been learning and passing down how to have that relationship. And I just think about all the people on my Navajo side who understand that our sacred sites can come under attack in a similar way, and how I can share this with them and how they can share with their friends and so on and so forth. Because when it really comes down to it, what we're looking at is the world's biodiversity, how that is being affected by the climate crisis, and how our protection of those sacred spaces counts for over 80% of the world's biodiversity. And that starts with and ends with us as Indigenous people on our lands protecting what is sacred to us. And on a whole, that means protecting the biodiversity for the world that allows us to keep living here as human beings. And that's something that I think really speaks to not only our other Indigenous relatives, but to people in the world on a whole, like who hasn't been thinking, dang, it's been really hot this summer. It's been really hot for the past decade. It's just getting hotter. This is the coldest winter it's ever going to be again in the world forever, because of the irreparable damage that companies like the 10K company have done with their projects like the Magellan pipeline, because it comes down to the land. Again, that's all I keep thinking about. Thinking about my family and our connection to the land, thinking about this project and so many other countless projects and the connection to the land. But it's really heartening to remember that when we're fighting for this, we're part of the thousands and millions of Indigenous people in the world who are fighting for our lands and our sacred connection to it. And that is a direct correlation to what is battling the fossil fuel industry right now. Anyways.
Yeah, I think, yeah, no, I just think about that too. To answer one of the questions in chat is what they're trying to do is build a pipeline through has a regional distribution for diesel, gasoline, and aviation fuels. And just local petroleum products. And one of the things that strikes me as odd, like funny, they named it Magellan after a Portuguese colonial, who's coming from a colonial power, who tried to travel across the entire world, got as far as the Philippines, and met indigenous resistance and was killed. And so, what a terrible name to call a pipeline that you're attempting to build through a Chetty Shakoi territory right next to a sacred site. It's just, I mean, I don't think you need to I'm a poet, so perhaps I see analogies and metaphors everywhere, but I don't think it's much of a leap to say poor choice of words.
Oh yeah. Oh, all right. Can we get that slideshow back up? I'm gonna run over how we can actually submit testimonies and comments to the PUC for folks. That was an amazing last comment or to end that part of the segment, Mark. Oofta, oofta. So we have 3 different ways to actually submit our online orders. And Brenna, if you could get that back up for us. I'm going to start out with online submissions, and we have about 4 slides just to easily go over it. And to do your online submission on the PUC website, you actually have to fill out an account, which is super easy. We're going to go over it right now. And the website is on the screen right there. It's the mn.gov/PUC/get-involved, and you can read the rest on there. It's super easy to do, so we're going to move to the next slide. And so this is where you just fill out your little account and put your name, your first, last, optional information, but it's also probably a little bit good to put where you're coming from, just like we put in the chat here today. Address, city, state, optional phone number, and your email, of course. Super easy. Let's move to the next one. And then this is where we get ready for your submission part. So just to note that your submissions will be public. If I remember right, they get calculated once a week and they'll submit them in a bulk, and you can check the submissions online. I'm going to check, and I'll be secretly judging you if you don't fill this out for us, Anyways, let's see. It's ensuring that you provide the docket number in there, and that's docket number 23-109. That's 23-109. And then you can easily give out your public comment. For instance, I oppose the Magellan pipeline reroute permit. I support the no build alternative, and we need to protect the Pipestone National Monument and the sacred quarries. The current cultural survey is incomplete and unacceptable. Deny this permit. That's something I'd say. And then you can see that you can attach the little files down below, and where Leanna had mentioned that if you wanted to grab that FPIC file on the Rise and Repair website, and then just attach it there. It's simple. It's simple. All right, next slide. And like I said, there are different ways. We're on, and after you submit it on the last slide, you're good to go. But if you want to submit via email, which to me, email is always the easiest. And I actually did this for the organization a week ago. Make sure that you have the right email address, which is consumer.puc@state.mn.us. For the subject, ensure that you put the docket number. Again, that's 23-109. And like I said, put your comment in there. I oppose the Magellan pipeline reroute permit. We ask that, we're trying to guide the PUC in the right direction. Try not to get too ferocious at them. We think that they want to make the right direction, that they just need the support. So let's get out there and support the PUC to be good neighbors and do the right thing. So when you write your email, make sure that you're clear, you're positive, and ensure that our communities are being reflected in this decision. Next slide. So offline submissions, because some of us love snail mail and helping out the Postal Service. The address is U.S. Mail Consumer Affairs Office, Minnesota Public Utilities Commission, 1217th Place East, Suite 350, St. Paul, Minnesota, 55105. And simply, it's similar to how you would write your email. Ensure that you have the docket number in there and send it out. Try to get it there. We're asking that this, the end period comment time is June 22nd, but if you can get it in there as soon as possible, make sure that your comment is heard. And one more time. Next slide. Some of the common concerns that you might want to bring up. Construction will cause more MMIWR issues within the area, in particularly man camps. The pipeline could rupture. Land and water contamination, not just from a ruptured pipeline, but from also the construction. Impacts to endangered species. Leanna covered endangered species, a fish earlier. The Braveheart geologist, he covered in an amazing presentation how we've lost, I think it was about 80% of the biodiversity within the Pipestone Quarry region. And if you can catch his webinar on the biology of that, I would encourage you to check that out. Free and prior informed consent, like I said, Leanna's has the Rise and Repair link to understand FPIC. Magellan One Oak, were not qualified to conduct their own traditional cultural survey, and their survey looks like it is incomplete. And to me, it feels like they used an AI, one of those AI language models to just spread it out and put it out there. Furthermore, we were talking about it in the Redstone movement that the means of how they did the cultural survey, it looks to me, or looks to us, that they were not following the Historical Society guidelines on common cultural surveys, and they perhaps could have, or no, perhaps went and made sure that qualifications for other cultural sites weren't fully inspected. Also asked that 60-day extension for the public comment period. Furthermore, tribal and cultural resources, protection of the Pipestone Quarry itself, economy and tourism, outdoor recreation, the natural environment, water, trails, wildlife, and land, human, social, and physical health related to that area, historical and family community connections to that land. All of us in Minnesota has gone up there and checked out the core, at least most of us. And so we have connections to that area if you're indigenous or non-indigenous to the land. And any other specific concerns that you might have. Remember, the docket number is 23-109, And we're asking that you get your comment in before June 22nd, and it's due by 4:30 at the latest. So try not to be the, cramming before the test is due. Your next steps, next slide. Next steps are to keep updated with us. You can follow Braveheart Society at braveheartsociety.com and also on Facebook. We're on Indigenous Environmental Network, and I hope that you follow them and check out their website as well. MUCWA, where I'm the co-executive director from, we have a Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, all muckwaminkana.org, which means Bear Path. And Honor the Earth, where a lot of the information from my portion of the slideshow came from their previous webinar just a few days ago. You can follow honortheearth.org on Facebook, Instagram, and I believe they have like a LinkedIn and other stuff. And that's all I got for you all. I hope that you get your submission as soon as possible. We're counting on you. And like I said, it is a public comment. I'll be secretly judging if I don't see your name on there. Miigwech.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
I would also just like to say, if you ever kind of have a loss of what to say, you can go into the public comments and take a look and peruse around. And also, you don't have to take our word for it on all of this. All of the stuff that we're talking about has been documented by the pipeline company itself. And you can see the submissions, and you can see that 6 of the tribes engaged in this cultural survey. You can see the frustration that the tribal historic preservation officers have had. You can see people pushing back. I know that there's somebody here who is mentioning that their relatives, their families from Crow Creek, and I just want to give a big shout out to Chairman Peter Lenke, and he's incredibly passionate, vocal, and outspoken opponent of the pipeline and standing up as one of the protectors that is really putting his time, his energy, and his focus on trying to protect the Pipestone quarry. And to go back to Tashi's comment, and it got me thinking, like, what else can we do? Is like, well, write to your council people back home and make sure this is on their radar. Tag your tribal chairs. Talk to your tribal historic preservation officers. Let them know that this is something that they need to engage in. Um, it's a really difficult job getting our tribal governments rallied and motivated and all pointed in this right direction. And we know the reason why is because back home there's always really difficult situations. And we kind of live in this emergency response scenario where we're kind of going from crisis to crisis to crisis. And, there's a scattering of happy events like the 150th anniversary of the Battle of Little Bighorn that I know a lot of people are really excited about. Lexi Orville Looking Horse is having his Peace and Prayer Day over at another sacred site, Maskopaha, and they're over at Bear Butte. Oh, and yeah. And so we got a lot going on this summer, and we got to remind our tribal governments, like, hey, this is important. This is where they a one-page letter from a tribal government will carry so much weight, as well as organizations, and of course, our individuals and our people who are watching right now. And it's really important, even if you're from out of state, and let's say you just support Indigenous rights. Let's say you have a relationship with the Pipestone Quarry. Let's say you don't want any more fossil fuels, and you're worried about the contamination of petroleum leaking onto into the groundwater and to the surface. And yeah, just want to say it's a real honor to be here, and thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Yeah, miigwech,
Yeah.
everyone. Thank you.
Welcome in Minowa.
Take a walk, men.
I think that's what we got.
don't know if I can close the webinar from my end.